I launched a podcast that made its way into the top 20 Apple Podcasts for entertainment news in its debut week, and I'm chronicling my journey. Let's dive in. By the way, my name is KJ Miller, and I'm in the process of launching my fourth career. My first career was in retail. I was a buyer and consultant for several years in the retail industry. After that, I launched my own cosmetics business, some of which you can see here on the wall. I ran that for 7 years. A few years ago, I tacked on teacher to my resume when I became a lecturer at Yale School of Management. And by the way, I'm still doing that job, still loving it. And recently kicked off my fourth career as a content creator. The difference between this career and all of the other careers is I've decided to chronicle my journey for everyone to see. Partially because I think it might be helpful for you, and partially because it's more content, which obviously I need in this career. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, please be sure to hit the subscribe button. And with that, let's get into it. Now, today we're going to be talking about the lead up to my podcast launch. My podcast is called Two Queens, Two Crowns, and the 5 things that I did this time around that I believe helped the podcast have such a strong debut. And the reason I say this time is because this isn't my first time up at bat. I have created and launched 3 other podcasts in the last 10 years, and none of them have ever debuted as well or been so successful straight out of the gate. In fact, the first episode of this podcast got almost 300 listens on its first day. And it took me weeks to get to that number with my last show. So this show is definitely off to a really great start. Now, I know that the number 300 listens sounds small, but 2 things you should know. The first thing you should know is that statistically speaking, if you get 32 downloads for your episode within the first week, that puts you in the top 50% of podcasters. Most podcasts don't get listened to. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of them out there. Most of them don't have that many listeners. So for me to get 300 listens on one singular platform in my first day, that is actually a pretty big deal. But the second thing, and this is actually my first tip, you've got to launch with the audience you have, not with the audience you want. Most of the podcasts you hear about or see featured in the Apple categories are from people with huge audiences, okay? We're talking about celebrities, we're talking about influencers with millions of followers, really well-known authors and public speakers. Those are the people who typically get featured when you're looking at, browsing categories on Apple or on Spotify. And so that can trick us all into thinking that in order to have a successful podcast, you have to have a huge following. But the truth is, you can have a great podcast without any of that. I've never let the fact that I'm not a celebrity stop me from believing that I can do great things with my show. Now, obviously, having a large following would be helpful prior to launching your show, but if you wait for that to happen, you could be waiting forever. So jump in. My second piece of advice is to tell your audience before you launch, not after. Now, this advice sort of flies in the face of a lot of advice out there. Typically, you may hear that you should have some episodes already available when you announce the podcast so people can go and listen and have multiple episodes to listen to. And the thing is, that is perfectly good advice if you want to do it that way. I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm just saying that in this particular instance, I felt like it was much more authentic to me and the journey that I'm on to let my community know that this thing was coming. One thing that I've tried to be on TikTok, which is my primary social media account. Give me a follow, by the way. I am _KJ Miller. I've always tried to be super honest and authentic about what I'm going through in the moment. So to me, it felt very natural to let people know that I was working on a podcast, especially because the theme of the show really was inspired by the conversations I was having on TikTok. I was having a lot of conversations about how to celebrate 2 amazing women, in this particular case, Beyonce and Taylor Swift, celebrate their accomplishments and lift them up on a pedestal as opposed to pitting them against one another. Those are the conversations I was having on TikTok. And I believe that strategy helped the show have a much stronger debut than my prior shows, where I waited until an episode was live to reach out to my network and to talk about it. This time around, I built a little bit of anticipation. And yes, it did mean that if people came and loved episode 1. They didn't have an episode 2 to immediately go to, but I'm okay with that because it meant that I had a much stronger debut and an actual community of people who were waiting for the show when it aired. All right, so my third tip for launching your show is to spend a little bit, but not a lot, of money. Now, this one comes with a huge disclaimer. You absolutely can launch a podcast pretty much for free, right? Spending almost no money at all because there's so many free resources out there. So I very much recommend that if you truly have no income to spare on this, do it all for free. However, I will say I've gone the completely free route with my other shows, and I found that spending just a little bit of money, not much, actually has made a big difference in the quality of the show and the quality of how the show is perceived. At least I tend to think so. So I'm going to tell you the things that I spent some money on, okay? It really is just 3 things. The first is basic equipment, basically the equipment that you see here. The second is recording software. And then the third is my cover art. So let's jump into equipment. First of all, there are a million videos about podcasting equipment. This is what I recommend for like someone who is just getting started with the basics, okay? What I did was, first of all, I researched the best low-priced microphones. So for me, low price means under $100. And I ended up going with this one here. This is the Audio-Technica ATR 2100X. It's available on Amazon and all sorts of other websites. And the cost, typically it's listed at around $70 or $80. I have seen it go as low as more like $50 on Amazon, but this kept coming up as a really great microphone on the low end of price. Because there are microphones you can spend $300, $400, $500 on a microphone. I simply was not willing to do that. I think this one has really great sound quality. It achieves what I need it to achieve. And again, it's basically around $70. Okay, so that was the first thing, is the microphone. The second thing is this arm here. This is the newer microphone arm stand. And the reason I decided to get a stand, this microphone comes with a stand that you can just put on your desk. I used that for my last show, and I just found that it was kind of wobbly. It didn't stay in place. And also it made the distance between me and my laptop kind of weird. I don't know. I didn't love it. I felt like I was always knocking it over. So I wanted something a bit sturdier and a bit of a cleaner aesthetic. So I went with this, $17.99 on Amazon. And I am going to link all of these things just to make it easy for you. Some of them might be affiliate links. You don't have to use them, but to make it easy, I am just going to throw all the links in the show description. Okay, so my basic equipment was this microphone and this stand. I did also buy this windscreen, which is this black foam cover. Any windscreen will work. This one was $3 on Amazon. In terms of headphones, I decided not to buy new headphones. I already owned AirPods. I think any headphones you have are going to work. And I do think headphones tend to be important if you have a co-host. You don't want, when they're talking, for that sound to come into your microphone. So I do think headphones help, but I think you can just use what you've got. And then the other thing that I happened to have that you might not have is a ring light. Now, I ran a cosmetics company for almost a decade. Of course, I had a ring light. So I think having some sort of light source is important. You can record during the day facing a window, use that as light. It doesn't have to be fancy, but also desk ring lights, the ones you can just clamp onto your desk, are something like $20, $30. So if you know you're in a room that is poorly lit, I would go ahead and invest in a ring light as well. I will link one that I happen to like, but again, you can do research around that. So all in terms of my setup costs, right, which is for my equipment, $91, which I think is pretty good. Again, you could spend $500 on a microphone alone. I was not willing to do that. All right. So that's my basic equipment costs. The second thing that I decided to go ahead and spend money on this time around was my recording software or my recording platform. So I use Riverside. And I used Riverside for my previous podcast, but I decided to stick with the basic free version. And look, it was good enough. I think, again, if you don't have money to spend on this, for sure, go with free. Okay. However, the reason I decided to go ahead and upgrade and spend, they have a plan, their pro plan is $19 a month. there were two reasons I decided to upgrade. The first and most important for my purposes was you can download the audio tracks separately. I have a co-host for my show, and for me, when I'm editing the audio, I like to have the ability to edit us separately, because sometimes maybe I do something that's too loud or I'm talking over her. I want to like mute that so we can make sure we're hearing her okay, vice versa, right? And you can't do that when you have to download the tracks all at once, which is what you can do on the free version. You can only download one track of all the participants. So that gets a little bit more advanced, or if you are doing a podcast and it's just you, you don't need that, right? But I did. So that was the main reason I decided to upgrade to Riverside Premium. The second reason was, I'm going to be posting, and I have already started posting a lot of clips on social media. If you're on the free version, one, you have to have the Riverside watermark on all of your posts, which for branding purposes, I just don't love. And then two, there's more you can do with branding within the platform in terms of adding your logo and things that I wanted to be able to do. Here's what that has looked like so far when I have sent out clips. So that's why I decided to upgrade. And for me, thinking about $19 a month, I felt like, that cost is going to pretty much pay for itself if I can get even just a handful of people to subscribe to our, subscription only content, which we are launching at the end of this month. So to me, it didn't seem like too much of an ongoing cost. Now, the third place where I decided to spend money, where in the past I did not, was my cover art. So I used Fiverr. Fiverr is such a great platform if you aren't familiar with it, where you can get, first of all sorts of goods and services for really good deals. I typically have used it for graphic design, but there are a bunch of things you can do on there. And I found an artist whose work I really loved, because these artists will showcase their portfolios. And she had a package where you could get two options for your podcast cover art for $25. First of all, she was so fast. She gave me those options same day, which was great because I reached out the day before my podcast launched. So appreciate her for that. And she gave me three options instead of two. I ended up going with this one. I think it looks so good, so clean. And just so you guys can see the difference between what she did and what I did, here's mine, okay? So that's what I was able to do in Canva. Now look, your girl is not a designer, so please don't clown me too hard. I know that about myself. I know that's not one of my skill sets. So that's why I decided, you know what? It's worth it to me to go ahead and spend a bit more. In the other shows that I had, I did just design something very quickly, typically in PowerPoint or Canva, and they weren't bad, like, to be very clear. I actually think for two of my shows, the cover was mostly like a picture of myself and my co-host. I think picture-based covers are a bit easier, but for this one, I actually didn't want to put my face on it because I didn't want people to think that the two queens I'm referring to are me and my co-host. I mean, we are queens, to be very clear, but that's not what we're talking about in the show. In the show, we're talking about, women, famous women, celebrities, women in media, women in business who have historically been pitted against each other. And we're talking about the ways they've actually helped and propelled one another. That's the premise of the show. And so I didn't want people to get confused. So I knew I didn't want our face on it. So it was going to be design heavy, and I'm not a designer. So for me, that $25, 100% worth it. So let's recap my cost. So on my setup, I spent $91 on equipment, $25 on my cover art. That's about $116. Okay. That's my upfront cost. Then my ongoing cost for now, the only thing I have an ongoing cost with is Riverside, which is $19 a month. To me, it's a nice investment. I'm not saying it's nothing, but for me right now, it's very doable. You're going to have to make that decision for yourself. Which of these costs feel doable, because the reality is it is all a gamble. I can't guarantee I'm going to have subscribers. I can't guarantee I'm going to grow my show big enough to attract advertisers or any of the other things that might allow me to monetize. But I believe in myself, and I believe in the content that I'm making, and I believe I will be able to monetize. So I see it as an upfront investment that will pay dividends. Oh, and I forgot to mention this. I did not buy a fancy camera. I'm using my laptop's camera. I have a MacBook Air, and I think the camera is perfectly fine. I'm not in 4K, but you can see me. Okay. So I didn't think it was worth investing in a whole nother camera for now. Okay. Tip number 4, and this one is very personal to me. I'm doing a non-interview based podcast. And I do advise that for a few reasons. Now, look, again, this is personal to me. It's my personal preference. I tend to prefer podcasts that are not interview based. If you love interview based podcasts, obviously you should go for it. But here's the thing. I personally feel, just from a strategy perspective, that interviews introduce a level of variability that I do not love. So let's say I'm able to book Beyonce on my podcast next week. Obviously, next week's episode is going to blow up, okay? I'm going to have millions and millions of downloads if the queen ever decided to grace me that way. But then let's say the week after that, the person I'm able to book is my middle school English teacher. Well, first of all, my middle school English teacher was amazing. Shout out to Mrs. Heinmiller. But also, we all know my listens are going to plummet, right? I'm never going to reach that height of Beyonce. I don't like variability on that level that I just can't, I have no control over. Maybe not no control. Obviously, I can try and book amazing guests, but you're not always going to get the world's best guests. Okay. So that's one level of variability that I don't love. The second level of variability is the guests themselves. Not all guests are created equal. Some people are really not great at giving interviews. I'm sure we have all listened to podcasts where the person being interviewed is incredibly boring. I know I have, and I hate that. So to me, I just feel like I want you to be able to vibe with my content based on the decisions that I'm making, right? Did I pick a good topic? Did I do good research? Am I making compelling points? Am I being charismatic and entertaining and thoughtful and insightful? If all of those things are true, I should hopefully have a formula for a really good show. And I don't want to mess that formula up by every single week introducing a level of variability that I cannot control. So I would say to consider doing a non-interview based show, particularly if you have a topic in mind that you're really passionate about or know a lot about and can find someone to be a co-host with you so that it can be conversational. Now, look, I will also say, I think solo podcasts can be great. There are some really good ones out there. So if you've got a topic you can opine on your own in a really smart way, then make that your focus. And then you can have guests come on every now and then. But I just think it, again, introduces variability and a lack of control that I personally don't love. Okay, and tip number 5. Tip number 5 is to focus on community over big numbers. Here's why I say that. First of all, remember what I said at the top about the fact that statistically, if you get over 32 downloads of your episode in the first week, you're already in the top 50% of all podcasts. That means what we're aiming for here isn't necessarily huge numbers. What we're trying to drive is for a group of people who really care about your content to continually come back and keep you sort of in that upper echelon. Because once you're there, if you have a loyal following, there's so many things you can do to monetize that are going to be easier to do than trying to build up a following that is huge, 100,000 people, 500,000 people, millions of people. I mean, look, God bless it. I hope I can get there, but I'm not focused on getting 500,000 subscribers and listeners. I am focused on building a community with the people who I've got, right? So what does that mean? That means I'm online every day responding to comments. I'm in my YouTube comments. I'm in my TikTok comments. I'm in the Spotify comments, which I just learned was even a thing recently. Like, I'm in the comments engaging, and I'm not just dropping hearts, although I do drop a lot of hearts. I'm responding to questions and I'm replying with video on TikTok. I'm really trying to make it feel as though what we've got here is a community. I'm listening to you. You're listening to me. We're in conversation with one another. I think that is a much better long-term strategy in terms of how I develop my career as a content creator versus trying to go viral and say the most viral thing and get the most number of eyeballs on any one piece of content. Because the truth of the matter is, if I haven't built community with those million people who saw that piece of content and engaged, they're not going to come back. I want people to keep coming back. That's how you build a sustainable content creator career. So that's my focus. Can I make sure that every single person who's come, so let's say my first episode, I had 300 on Spotify, a few hundred on Apple. So let's call it 600 people listened in that first day. And maybe by the end of the week, I get to 1,000. So maybe I've got 1,000 people right now listening to my podcast. I want those 1,000 people to fall in love with the show. So how am I going to do that? By continuing to engage with them. They're going to know, hey, if you leave a comment, I'm going to do my best to read it and to reply to it. And I'm going to shout you out. We actually shout out our commenters on our show if I think you make a really great point. So it's not going to feel like me just talking at you. It's going to feel like we are in conversation with one another. And I'm going to keep looking for additional ways to do that, because I think that's important so that I can get all 1,000 of those people to come back and maybe tell a friend, so that a month, 2 months from now, maybe it's 2,000 people, maybe it's 3,000 people. That to me is the sustainable way to grow. So that's it for this video. I really hope it was helpful. If it was, and you want to see more content like that, drop a comment. I will respond, and be sure to subscribe. I'll see you next time.